to MD Talks. Let me introduce first MD Talk to you. MD Talk is a platform basically created by the group of doctors from US and India, so that there is an Indo-US collaboration and basically improve the patient care through different ways of technology-based platforms, providing opinions, providing education, having a free speech platform for all the doctors from both the world, so that they can connect with the rest of the community as well as with patient. And we started this initiative with MyMD Talk so that we can interact with different entities within the community, whether it is lawyers, based on security with the governing laws, understand the dynamics of the system very well. So, we are very lucky and fortunate to have you on board today to, discuss about the National Medical Commission Act 2019. I think it was just implemented on September 25th of this year and has been in discussion for many years. We were able to, follow your blogs post from, your website and was very impressed. So let me introduce Mr. Ashwin Sapla. He's a well-known lawyer from New Delhi. He's a partner with General Corporate Practice at New Delhi office of Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. He's been in the practice for with experience of 19 plus years, pretty much providing advices on intellectual property, drug and medical regulatory compliances. And the thing that we were really impressed and get to know more about is that he has in-depth knowledge of National Medical Commission Act, which he and his team has already been reviewing that before. And his area of expertise, especially with anti-corruption and anti-kickback laws, I think something with this Commission Act will definitely come into action and improve the overall quality of the system. So with the rest of the team members, Mr. Sapla, if you could help us out and understand more about National Medical Commission Act 2019, and we'll let you speak now.
So, thank you so much, Dr. Abhijit, firstly for having us over on this virtual meeting. We all hope that everybody is safe and sound. We are going through difficult times, but hopefully, I hope we get back to normal life soon. Just by way of a very, very quick introduction, I would like to sort of introduce. I am a partner with the firm of Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. It's one of India's leading firms, and it's a full-service firm. And I, along with my colleagues Biplab, Karthik, Jashasvi, who are also part of the meeting today, we are part of the firm's pharmaceutical and healthcare practice, and this is basically a sector-specific practice which is catering exclusively to the pharma and the healthcare sector. And by virtue of that, obviously, I think in the past 6-7 months, everything that's happening is in some way related to life sciences and the healthcare sector. So suffice to say that we've had our share of sleepless nights, so to speak. But just to sort of quickly dive in, essentially what we are hoping to discuss today are a few of the points. First is obviously the salient features of the National Medical Commission Act 2019. Why did this act come into play? What was the need? Most importantly, what are the differences between this act and the Medical Council Act of 1956? Consequently, what are the impact on doctors, especially on non-resident Indian doctors? I understand that there's a lot of membership of MD Doc, which has a lot of the NRI doctors. And Dr. Vijay, please correct me if I'm wrong on any of these facts. Yes. There are some new provisions that have come in. What are the issues? And then obviously we'll open out the floor. So please bear with us while we present this rather interesting, I would say, presentation. So sure. Coming to this particular act, the NMC Act, so to speak, what is it? What's the background of this act? So essentially, this act came in the year 2019, and ideally the act was to come into effect from a date which was a year later, so as to sort of give everybody an opportunity to sort of get acquainted with what will be the changes and everything. So, and of course, lo and behold, 25th of September, the act came into being. Now, In totality, the NMC Act actually repeals the IMC Act in a way. It sort of totally replaces and repeals it. Most importantly, it replaces the Medical Council of India completely, which was the original body which was governing and regulating the practice of medicine in India. It constitutes the National Medical Commission. Some can say it's the same thing as the Medical Council, but the fact is there's a new regulatory body. Consequently, what's happened is that the Board of Governors that was there under the IMC now stands dissolved. And I think the most important repercussion of this act are actually twofold. One is obviously there are new qualification standards for practicing medicine in India. And I think most importantly, I think the overarching effect of this act is the regulation of medical education in the country. Now, why did this happen? The reasons essentially, and I think if you look at what the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare had to comment on is that it's going to basically steer away medical education into a more transparent and accountable system. So which basically tells you that, the background has been that the medical education system has its share of controversies. Interestingly, there have been a lot of controversies. There have been a lot of issues in terms of how colleges have been getting accreditation, how people have been selected, and this issue has gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. I was fortunate to sort of look at some of these hearings. By virtue of the fact that my wife, who's a Supreme Court lawyer, was actually involved in some of these cases. Secondly, I think most importantly, there was this issue that there was a lot of questions being raised on how was the regulator functioning, how were members of the regulatory board be selected. So I think what this does is it sort of brings in a merit-based selection as opposed to an elected regulator-based, sort of selection process. Well, they say that people with professionalism and integrity are now going to be placed to steer. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding. Again, just sort of recaps on what the issues were. There were a lot of allegations of corruption. Again, the biggest issue was approvals granted to medical colleges. Right. The education system, the medical education system regulation was supposed to be was an issue there. Obviously, ensuring availability of adequate and high quality professionals all across India. Now, again, one can say that, we've had the IMC since 1956. Does that mean that we haven't had great doctors? I don't think so. But this was an issue. This was discussed.
Correct.
But I personally feel we've got some great, doctors. We've got some great doctors who've gone abroad and earned a name for themselves. So I don't think this could be an issue, but it's there. It was part of the discussions. I think it's again the issues all surrounding around transparency and objectivity in terms of the medical institutions and ethical standards in terms of medical services. Now, coming to the differences between the two, old act versus new act. So we've sort of, and we wrote about this in detail in our blog. So, but we'll just sort of explain. The primary difference is obviously the National Medical Council is the governing body. The governing body and the Indian Medical Council Act was the Medical Council of India. Under NMC, there are going to be nominations and appointments by the central government. So obviously, there seems that there's going to be a level of government control over these appointments. On the other hand, the MCI was essentially members who were elected, from amongst the members of the faculty. So there was like a closed kind of a selection system, so to speak. Kind of like if I were to draw a parallel, kind of like, how judges are appointed. Today we have a collegiate system of appointment of judges. It's got its fair share of pluses and minuses, but there has been an attempt by the government to sort of get into that and, institutionalize it.
Right.
Obviously they haven't succeeded there, but here I think, that level of institutional control has come in.
Definitely.
it has its pluses and minuses also, but I'll be happy to hear what people say about this. Again, there is a search committee, which again is part of the NMC Act, which is basically comprised, which basically deals with the appointment of the search and the appointment of people. IMC doesn't have this. Another issue was conflicts of interest. I think in the old setup, there was a situation where a disclosure is vis-a-vis conflicts was only dependent on participation in certain proceedings. So to cut a long story short, a conflict disclosure was only required in case on a case-by-case basis, right? And that disclosure requirement was onerous on people. Now, obviously, that gave rise to a lot of issues because there were a lot of members who had their own interests. And obviously, when you're at a body which is a governing body, if you have interests in what that in the practice that the body is going to govern, obviously there are questions going to be raised, and there have been questions been raised. As far as the provisions of the NMC are concerned, there is a mandatory declaratory requirement of assets and liabilities at the time of the time you enter and you leave the office. So there's a sort of double entry versus and exit sort of check. The objective here is that conflicts issues, potential interest issues would be addressed at the start itself, and obviously would also be looked at the end to see where you stand vis-a-vis what happened when you entered, and what happened when you left the organization. So I think there is I would look at it as a way to sort of make things more transparent. Now, there are certain restrictions. It says that you will not, no member of the committee will accept any employment for a period of 2 years. Now, I feel this is quite an onerous sort of condition. I'm sure somewhere down the line this will be diluted. IMC didn't have this. This could also be an attempt to sort of remove any potential quid pro quo kind of relationships or arrangements, so to speak. Like, it's also been suggested, like in the judicial circles, that judges should have a cooling off period. They've put it here. Let's see how it works, because again, the question is going to be, if somebody's taken up a position at the NMC, then the moment they retire, are they not entitled to, to earn a living? So let's see how this gets diluted as well. The biggest, I think some of the biggest changes have happened is vis-a-vis the provisions of qualification. Under the NMC, they have made a requirement for a national eligibility entrance test for into medical education institutions. There was no such provision in the IMC, so this is kind of like bringing this at par with other NEET level tests. There is also an exit test, an additional test which has come out, wherein, at a final year, you would have to take this test, which will be incremental in issuance and grant of license. Again, I feel that this is also an attempt to ensure that, there are quality doctors coming out. But I think from a point of view of non-resident doctors, again, the requirement of NEXT is there. If you have a foreign medical qualification, in order to obtain a license for practicing in India, you would need to sort of qualify through NEXT. This is, when you compare it with IMC only provided for a recognition of medical qualifications by the committee, but and that would give rise to an automatic ability to practice. But I think that has also been sort of regularized, institutionalized, standardized here with this new requirement. Another thing is they've set up these autonomous boards to act independently of each other and the main committee in respect to undergraduate and postgraduate education, in terms of assessment of qualifications, and a separate ethics and medical registration board Again, IMC didn't have this. IMC had this all as part of one organization. Here they've tried to streamline it and called them as autonomous boards. The question is, if you're going to have a parent body regulating over the autonomous boards, then what is the level of autonomy that they have? Another thing which the NMC recognizes is the fact that there are community health providers. Given the expanse of the country, it may not be possible to have highly qualified healthcare providers even in the remotest parts of the country. But they've given a provision whereby there could be a provision for community health providers who will obviously have to have the qualifications, but they will also be allowed to prescribe certain levels of medication and provide preventive health care. I think this is essentially to sort of bridge the gap, especially in the highly sort of remote and rural areas, where they'll have one or two people in a village who are trained as such, but they're also recognized and certified like that. So coming to essentially the meat of this issue is what are the impact that will happen. I think primarily it's going to be the qualification requirements. You'll have to sit through the next and get in order to be enrolled in the national register or the state register, so to speak. So you will have to qualify to obtain a license in India to practice in India as a medical practitioner, and also mostly importantly to enroll in a state or national register. Now, what happens if you don't? So what they've done is they've introduced a bar to practice that if you are not enrolled in the national or state register, you will not be able to practice as a qualified medical practitioner. And obviously there are penalties, like every law in India, there are criminal and civil penalties. The interesting bit is that what they've done is they have given an and or an or kind of a situation. An or kind of a situation. It could be an imprisonment penalty or a fine. So again, it is up to the adjudicating officer to sort of identify the penalty. Now, what they've done is they've sort of tried to dilute it, but I don't see how it sort of acts as a dilution. They've said that the regulating authority of the foreign country has to make an application before the NMC for grant of accreditation or recognition to whatever other qualifications that are granted abroad. Now, if that happens, the question is, does the requirement of next get diluted or removed? The answer, to my mind, on a read of this is no. This is just a recognition of qualifications of foreign countries, But yeah, they've said that, whatever was recognized under IMC will continue to be recognized in NMC. The question is, what does that leave? What else does that leave out? There are some provisions for non-allopathy practices. That's primarily because there is a push towards traditional forms of medication, naturopathy, homeopathy, and most importantly, the Indian forms of medication, Ayurveda and everything. I think what they've done is they've given that onus on the CHPs. Limited licenses can be given to the CHPs, who can actually provide this kind of service. Again, the question will remain that can a CHP actually provide a full range of services under the Ayurveda system or under the homeopathy system? Again, that's something which needs more clarification. So what they've done is the qualifications that are regulated, they are all they are the same as what the IMC regulated. While there are powers given to the two new autonomous boards, the post and the undergraduate boards, for recognizing additional qualifications. Again, the question is going to be, are they going to recognize these qualifications as they are, or how well they look at non-allopathic systems of medication? That's something which we still need to see, because again, the act is really new. Again, the question is, homeopathy and all is regulated under their own separate act. The IMCC Act also regulates different the traditional forms of medicine. Now the question will be that is there a conflict there? Again, that's something which one would need to sort of look at both these regulations to see. But I think for now, it would be suffice to say that at least the allopathic system of medicine, the allopathic system of treatment, that's basically covered. Now, I think in the course of this discourse, we've sort of, we have sort of identified some potential issues, but I think some of the major issues are the autonomy of the autonomous boards. Again, the question is, these boards, they say they are autonomous, but the question is they are still under the control of the NMC. So the question is, to what level are they autonomous? And to what level can the NMC and most importantly, the central government impact their decisions? So there again lies an issue of, in terms of at least transparency and effectiveness.
Right.
If it's not, if you're still not going to have a transparent system of functioning, what was the point of bringing out a new legislation? Obviously, there are a lot of issues in terms of how the act has been drafted. There are issues where how terms are to be interpreted. That's been left like that. Again, I think another issue is health in India is also part of the state list under the constitution. There could be a school of thought which says that the fact that the central government is sort of exercising all the control as the ultimate authority, could there be a dilution of the powers of the state? We see that there is overall supervision of the central government. People are going to be appointed by the central government. The question is, are the states going to take this, or are they going to object to this? Again, we are waiting and watching. But at the end of the day, the question is, to what level can the center exercise control over functions of the state? That's a big, and that's a Supreme Court level kind of a debate, which will have to happen. Now, the another issue is that these health CHPs who've been given recognition. Now, obviously, some people take it for granted that they are not full-fledged doctors. So what you're doing is you are actually giving recognition to people who are not completely trained in systems of medicine. There has been a lot of back and forth on this. There is one set of doctors who are saying that we have no problem with CHPs, but then you have to limit what they can and cannot do. The question is, can a CHP identify hardcore, Schedule X, Schedule H kind of drugs, or are CHPs only there to give immediate preventive healthcare? So again, there are dialogues going on. Obviously, if the dialogues don't succeed, we can see this going to court. So I think, just to quickly conclude, I think the NMC Act essentially is more of an administrative sort of rejig, purely focusing on at least the delivery of medical education and regulation of practice of medicine. IMC still continues to be force. They haven't set out, they've come out with the act, but new standards have not been specified. So obviously that means the old standards continue. So at least as far as issues relating to ethical practice are concerned, we still have the same old regulations that are going on. The biggest sort of thing coming out of those regulations is that doctors cannot, at least in India, doctors cannot accept gifts, travel, hospitality, etc. from pharmaceutical companies. But the pharmaceutical companies, well, they have a voluntary code, but they're free to give them. So there are a lot of these issues are there. I don't see any change in how interaction of existing certified doctors with their patients is affected. Obviously, certification and qualifications of new doctors coming on board, or registration of doctors who are foreign trained, so to speak. Obviously, that is going to be impacted. So we'll have to see how that goes, whether or not people actually challenge this or not. So I think essentially, the biggest take homes are that medical education has been streamlined. There are new registration and qualification requirements, and most importantly, for doctors who are who've gotten their degrees outside India, they will obviously have to sit through a set of certifying examinations, like the same way you have in the US as well.
Right, right.
So I think those are the big sort of takeaways. From this, a lot still needs to be done in terms of streamlining the effectiveness of the act. So again, we are waiting and watching. We're seeing how this goes. So I think that's pretty much as far as the NMC Act is concerned. So now I'll open the floor to questions.
Yes, definitely. No, this is a great, what I would say, the enlightenment of what this NMC Act, because everyone here, even outside of India and within India, currently with Corona pandemic, things are kind of focused on the epidemic and pandemic right now. Things are going very worse in any country in the world. But this is a different, very different in terms of what we perceived as NMC Act will change. And as you correctly mentioned, it's more of a transparency of the governing body. They're trying to streamline in the beginning, and then introducing these foreign doctors to have the next exam before they come and practice, and giving that limited license to community health professionals so that they can reach out to for the preventive measure, but that the scope of practice hasn't been clearly defined. They could still go with the full-fledged practice saying, well, this is only preventive. And main thing is about what is to be done next, in terms of implementation, how they define it, how they implement it in state-wise manner. My biggest question right now, first one would be, have they discussed anything about telemedicine? Because, this Corona pandemic has brought up this telemedicine platform and telemedicine communication between patient and doctor largely. And I know one draft was released, or the one statement was released in the beginning of March or later part of the March, saying that registered medical practitioner can actually communicate with the patient through a telemedicine portal within India. So has they mentioned anything about expanding it, keeping it in the same way, or any changes in that perspective?
So you see, as far as telemedicine is concerned, telemedicine is subject matter of its own set of guidelines, the telemedicine guidelines. They were released some time ago. Obviously, the government released them because of the fact that there was this huge need to have contactless consultations.
Right.
See, telemedicine guidelines have their own set of rules, requirements in terms of what a doctor can prescribe and in what level of interaction. So obviously, there's certain different levels of interactions prescribed there. There's certain limits to restrictions on what kind of medication can be prescribed. There are certain sort of limits in terms of what kind of indications can you do a teleconsult for. So, for example, where the consult requires a physical interaction, you really can't do a teleconsult. There's a lot of sort of things. Again, even in the telemedicine guidelines, there are a lot of gray areas which are slowly now coming up, which I think will be addressed hopefully by the government. There are a lot of restrictions and requirements on platforms. There are a lot of restrictions and requirements vis-a-vis patient safety in terms of confidential patient information. So I think telemedicines they've tried to regulate telemedicines under its own set of guidelines. So obviously, as far as doctors, the practice of medicine is concerned, the practice of medicine would need to be looked at vis-a-vis the ethical practice guidelines and the telemedicine guidelines.
So that will come under, okay. So that will come under the ethical board in terms of the governing the laws of telemedicine.
Ideally, in a perfect world, yes.
Okay.
It should come as part of the practice of medicine, so to speak. Now, the question is it written down anywhere? The answer, I think, is no. But again, yes, but a rational derivation would be that it would come under the practice of medicine.
We have Dr. Gupta also from US. Mohit, do you have any questions to ask?
Thanks, Mr. Sabra. It was very in-depth presentation. I got to hear a little bit about the the national solution. So when you mentioned the NRI doctors, so does it affect the NRI doctors who graduated in India and then moved abroad? Let's say if they want to provide second opinion or something of that sort back home.
So you see, that's a good question, Dr. Gupta, and I think that's what I was referring to in terms of the gray areas that this creates. The question is that somebody who's graduated from India would be an Indian graduate doctor for all practical purposes. The question would be that did that person register, with the NCI at the time? If not, the question would be that if you look at the new regulations, then such a person would have to register in India. But then again, if supposing you say you're sitting you're sitting in say San Francisco and giving an online consult, the question is, are you giving your opinion? Where are you practicing where are you practicing medicine? You are practicing medicine in the US. So you are really not practicing medicine in India. But then again, the question would be, you will have to look at it in terms of the interpretation, but your patient is in India. So I think it's one of those gray areas which is open to interpretation. And again, it has to be that somebody will have to be issued a notice, and we'll have to see how that person sort of challenges it. Because again, it's an interpretation issue because of the fact that there are civil and criminal penalties. But I would argue that this restricts the practice of medicine by doctors who are in India and who are practicing in India. That's the thing. But obviously, the thing that will come against you is that but then you fall under the category of a foreign qualified doctor. But then we'll say that the Act doesn't say foreign educated doctor; it says foreign qualified doctor. So it all depends on how smart your lawyer is to argue that case out for you.
Right.
Sure. There was, this interesting concept of B2B business we saw in rest of the, different sectors in within practice of medicine. This kind of B2B business started when I work as a hospitalist. So whenever a patient wants to get opinion or treatment from a specialist who may not be available within that, region or within that hospital, then as a hospitalist, I have to communicate with that specialist from, like UCSF or Mayo or Cleveland, and then get their opinion or understanding, and then discuss with the patient about what options they can do, decide whether they want to, aggressive measure of care. So where I act as a mediator while, communicate with the patient, but actually getting knowledge from the other physicians. So, that kind of, I don't know, as you mentioned about NMC Act, foreign doctors can be seen as a mediator as a primary source of information, while Indian registered medical practitioner can act as a mediator for the patient so that ultimately, they get what, they at least want to know, especially when patient cannot reach out or travel to other countries, but a doctor who is qualified enough to understand, the dynamics of the patient as well as understand the knowledge given by the other doctor from outside country. So to speak, I think that would be something where telemedicine can actually make that difference, because, previously all the people who used to travel to New York or Europe for higher medical care were only affluent and wealthy. But now with connecting these worlds together through telemedicine, a registered medical practitioner from India can obviously avail those services if they're provided to them.
No, I agree. I totally agree. I think one of the ways which this could work is if you have an Indian doctor, you go to your Indian doctor, and there's nothing which stops an Indian doctor from conferring with his colleagues in the US, for that matter, right? The Indian doctor can be the first point of contact, and then the Indian doctor can actually seek an opinion from his foreign colleague. Now the question is, that's a doctor to doctor interaction, right? So that's not really governed by it, by the NNC Act, because the US doctor is not providing direct advice to the patient. The US doctor is basically a point of referral,
Right.
a point of reference, right? So yeah, that's one way of doing it. There are different ways and permutations and combinations in which this can be commercialized.
Great, great. One more question I have. You mentioned about the next exam or the the exit exam for foreign qualified or foreign educated doctor. Have they mentioned anywhere where like what date are they going to implement this or where actually the process will start?
I don't think they've identified anything. I think they're still working out the
Working
kinks.
on it?
I think they they had an opportunity in Parliament, given the pandemic and given the fact that they had the ability to get certain bills passed. So I think they just got the bill passed. That's it. When I actually feel that they should have gotten a bill on medical devices, or they should have gotten the new Drugs and Cosmetics Act passed. But I guess they said, let's get whatever we can get passed, we'll get passed. So they did that, and they'll work out the kinks later.
And with regards to the community health professionals, with that limited license or helping them to, provide the preventive care to, remote areas, I understand at least they said limited license, but have they identified the qualification of that CHP, like specifically whether, that person has to be graduate or somebody who has to have a training or who has done previous medical education through non-allopathy courses like Ayurvedic or homeopathy or Unani?
No, I think right now the focus on CHPs is only at that village rural level provider basis. See, you already have those people there. You've got the
Right.
ASHA workers, you've got the midwives there. So I think the focus is to give those people recognition
Got
and
it.
give those people the ability, right? I think that's the immediate focus of the CHP recognition.
Right.
Now the question is going to be that the issue that is coming is that if you're recognizing CHPs, then they haven't been trained completely in medicine. They've gotten basic level training. Does that give them the ability and the experience to treat complex conditions? I don't think so, right? So that's going to be there. So that's something which we'll have to sort of. It may need some more refining, so to speak.
Definitely.
Yeah, I had a question on the similar line. That for the CHPs, there should be certain timeline during which they have to be under strict supervision. They need to be connected to certain doctors. They can approach. Otherwise, it puts the patient at a huge risk of misdiagnosis and false reassurance.
Yes, I agree, and I think when this was opened for comments, I think this was one of the comments which I believe should have gone, because I remember somebody discussing this with me, one of my hospital clients, and this was gone that why don't we have CHPs reporting into doctors either permanently or for a prescribed period of time. But then the question was, where are we going to find those doctors? The reason why we have CHPs is because we don't have doctors, right? Now, if it's a remote location, a CHP travels every day, you're just adding on to the burden on the CHP to go and report to the doctor every day who may be at a different location, right? So I think they will have to streamline what CHPs can and cannot treat, what CHPs can and cannot prescribe. And just to sort of go back to two questions before Dr. Abhijit, uh, the next exam, the government has provided for a period of 3 years. So they have said that within 3 years you have to start implementing the next exam. So there is time. So again, but that basically means that they still haven't gotten their stuff figured out yet.
No, I think that this is a wonderful discussion, and I think it will require more discussions down the road. And to the take-home points, as you mentioned, we are looking for a more transparent central governing body with
Right.
so-called autonomous boards, and defining actually at least the foreign doctor. They have opportunity to practice now as long as they clear the next exam, which probably will implement it in next 3 years, and
Right.
having utilization of this community health provider. I think if the vision goes right and the implementation goes right, that actually will help the patient care.
Right.
So, that's the take-home summary for us today. We'll definitely continue to have this discussion down the road. I think NMC Act is going to evolve, and it will have more and more information coming down the road. But I
Yeah.
sincerely thank you for your time. So to
Pleasure.
Mr. Ghosh, Mr. Lenin, Mr. Jain as well, and Mr. Sapra, I think you've been a great speaker, great knowledge, thorough knowledge, and I think we are very fortunate to have you today, discussing about this, and I hope rest of our colleagues and the doctors, both in NRI world as well as in India, will at least go through this and then understand the NMC Act. Even though there's not a
Sure.
major difference in the continuation of the current practice, it's good to know what's coming down the road.
Yeah, I think right now the focus should be to see how the telemedicine guidelines affect the practice of medicine rather than the NMC Act, because I don't see anything crazy happening on this front. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Great.
thank you so much,
Thank you so much.
and be safe. I know it's tough times, both the sides, here as well as there. So I
Yeah.
wish everyone a very safe life down here.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Nagave. Thank you
Thanks
so
so much.
much.
Okay, have a good day. Bye bye.
You too.